Everyone stand, please. Post. About. Face. Present. Arms.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Order. Arms.
Please remain standing for our invocation.
Let us pray. Eternal, most holy, and precious God, we thank you for this opportunity that you have given to us to come in on this time, this day set aside to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice and for those who left their family and their friends in order that we may have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Help us never to forget the sacrifices that they made. We thank you for them, and we thank you for this opportunity today. Bless us all that we keep them in our minds now and in the future. In the name of our God we pray. Amen.
You may be seated. Thank you, John. On behalf of the York County Historical Committee, I welcome everyone here today on this beautiful, beautiful day. I make no promises about tomorrow. But thank you very much for being here today, and we appreciate everyone coming out. And you've got a beautiful day to visit our town, Yorktown itself. We'll go ahead with our program then. Our first story going to be presented by Mr. Tim Smith of the York County Historical Committee.
Thank you. What you saw at the beginning was some rehearsals. The ROTC and the Fife and Drums had school today and on a half day, so they came straight from school and made it in time. And we appreciate Master Chief getting the crew here and them doing such a fantastic job. We have Dave Sienski is doing our bell for us. Dana's been ill, so he wasn't able to do it. But I wanted to note that it wasn't planned exactly, but with the exception of myself, everyone up here and everyone that's a big participant in this program is a veteran, and that's what the day is about. Veterans Day is about those that are with us and those that are not with us. And the stories are the stories of 8 of the men and women that we're going to be adding to the monument out front. We have 25 to add. some that we missed in the past, others are from the War on Terror, and we wanted to highlight 8 of the stories, and it takes a lot of time and research to get everything together to do that, but hopefully we'll have those names on before Christmas. I also wanted to say a word about Reverend Bagley here. Reverend Bagley did our invocation, will be doing our benediction as a Navy veteran, and also a 30-year veteran of the New York City Police Department. So he's quite the guy. The 25 men that we're going to be, 25 individuals we'll be adding to the monument, 6 are from the War on Terror, 1 is from the Vietnam War, 1 was lost in the Dominican Republic with the 82nd Airborne, 1 was lost in Taiwan. He was running flights to and from Vietnam. 3 are from the Second World War, 2 are from the First World War, 8 are from the American Civil War, 1 from the War of 1812, and 2 from the Revolutionary War. So that's the 25 to be added. The first story is of Sergeant Norman Evans. He's lost in July 7th of 1966, and what most people don't know is when we were heavily involved in Vietnam at the time, there was some kind of a dictatorship type thing, and Rich and them could probably correct me more, going on in Dominican Republic. So they sent a whole battalion of the 82nd Airborne down there. And Norman Russell Evans is killed in action down there. I think they only lose about 26. Of course, every loss is tremendous, but one of them was a York County boy. And we've decided, his nephew asked me if he was applicable to add to the monument, and we felt like he was. He's lost in action as a military, in a military action. He's buried near Fort Bragg in North Carolina. And a friend of mine that was a crew chief on a Huey told me the story of being, when he was lined up, he said, when we finished at Fort Rucker, we're lined up and told where we're going to be going, and everybody down the line, you're going to Vietnam, you're Vietnam. He said, I'm Dominican Republic, and I'm thinking, where in the world is that? And he ended up being the helicopter, this small coincidence. His helicopter is the one that picked up Norman Russell Evans' body and brought it back in. So that's one of our stories there. We've gotten a little out of sequence because Dan corrected our sequence for us, making sure we had everything in order of the way it should be. And Dana Trudell usually rings our bell and is ill, so we've had Dave Sansky from our committee step in, which worked out because David is also a veteran. War of 1812, was it? U.S. Air Force veteran. So we have a lot of veterans that we recognizing you, but I'd like for all the veterans to stand right now. And that's everyone, even if you're part of the program, please. Stand, raise your hand. There you go. That's tremendous. All right, and we're doing some more recognition. Our second story goes back to a different time period, 1777, and researching that far back is a little bit tougher, but Corporal Enos Dunn, he's in Thomas Nelson's company of the 1st Virginia Regiment. Of course, Thomas Nelson is a Yorktown name. He is one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence and forms a company. And they're up around Philadelphia, and the only thing in his file, there's not a major battle going on, is that he's dead. And that's the only thing in his file about it. He passes away somewhere around the early part of June of 1777 while they're deployed up to the Philadelphia area. So he's also one we'll be adding. Like right now, I'd like to recognize our guest. We have Post VFW, Post 824, doing our colors. They're always so supportive of what we do, a tremendous group. We have Disabled American Veterans, Chapter 13. We'll be placing a wreath. Some of those fellows do both jobs. They're in both groups. We have York High NJROTC with Master Chief Gyron. And this is his first time with us, so he has done a tremendous job getting these cadets up here. And how many of you have done this before? I know a couple of you have, yeah. So, and they're just pristine, you know. We like to keep them here all day. So, great unit, and York High is a great school. We also have the Children of the American Revolution will be presenting a wreath for us, and the National Daughters of the American Revolution will be presenting a wreath. So it's a lot of pieces in the puzzle going here. I think our Board of Supervisors are on a retreat, not a military retreat, but a retreat where they get together and come up with new ways to make York County better. So they're not here today. Our third story is Major Raymond Estelle. Major Estelle is stationed at Langley, Joint Force Base, Langley, Eustis, I think it's called now. And he is killed in April of 2011. And actually his widow came to our Memorial Day service in 2011, which was only a month after his loss. He's part of a contingent of American servicemen that are in a meeting in Afghanistan, and an Afghani pilot who had not connected to Taliban or anything else, but he had I guess his whole lifetime been involved in some type of conflict. He fought the Russians when they came into Afghanistan, was in all these things. He took 2 guns in this meeting and killed 8 Americans, 7 servicemen and 1 contractor. 2 of the men were from Langley Air Force Base, Major Stell and Major Ransom. And so their Major Stell was the president of the county. One of the things I didn't realize till last night was I was double checking my research was he was due to retire in September of that year. He would have had his 20 and it was planning on retiring in September and moving to Florida. So that's another one of our losses. At this point, I'd like to recognize our guest speaker, Rich Kilblain. Rich he's done so much stuff. I first met him, if you remember this, we were out filming on Fort Wool for some project, and he was in a World War II uniform, and he was out placing people according to photographs that were taken at the time for this documentary. And I've got to know him then and just have relished knowing Rich. He's just so, you could sit and listen to him all day. He's written 8 books. You can go to Amazon. His biography's on Amazon. The picture up in the right-hand corner of your program is Rich down in Operation Just Cause in Panama. He's with Special Forces Group down there. Retired just recently as a transportation historian over at Fort Eustis, but he was all over the place. When I know he would speak and do programs up at Fort Lee, and just probably all over the country, I would imagine.
Well, we'll see. I'm waiting. I'm taking it easy.
But he's just one of the most knowledgeable guys I've ever met. And one of the things that I think is really neat is he did a book that I've got a copy of, the first and I think the second one, and it's called The Filthy 13. If you remember the movie The Dirty Dozen, done in the 60s with Lee Marvin, The Filthy 13 is the real story of those men. And they weren't the criminals that are portrayed in the movie. They were actually very, very well trained American soldiers. So without any further, I could talk about Rich all afternoon. Turn the program to Rich Kilblain.
Thank you, Tim. All right. Thank you to all the distinguished veterans that are here. And I started out in Navy ROTC, turned my life around. I was goofing off. I come from a family of traditional military service. I was just going to go in as an enlisted man. And they created a Navy Junior ROTC program in our high school, and all of a sudden I became an officer, and I'm like, wow, I like training soldiers. I'm like, I think I might want to do this. Now, I still had to enlist as a private because I got turned down by ROTC and the academies and did my time over there, and then I got picked up for the prep school and got my commission. So good luck to you guys, all right? It was a great experience for me. All right. I'm talking off the cuff, so hopefully it'll be a little more entertaining than if I was to read a speech. The problem is, as Tim would know, is I can talk too long. All right, so I'll try to keep it brief. All right, we are celebrating Veterans Day. All right, it originally was Armistice Day, the end of the war to end all wars. We know how that worked out, all right? We've had 6 major wars since then. And when I talk about major wars, I'm talking about those wars where we have to call up our citizen soldiers, the Guard and the Reserves, and a whole lot of little ones in between, the Grenadas, Panamas, Dom Rep, Haiti, Nicaragua, Somalia. I mean, a long list. Those are the ones we can do with what we have on hand on active duty. And even then, you're looking at from the turn of the century, 1900, to World War I, we were already engaged in, well, let's see, we were fighting, the Army was fighting an insurrection in the Philippines. The Marines We're fighting a guerrilla war in Haiti that would last another 15 years, and we had already invaded Mexico twice. We are the most warlike country on the face of the earth. No other country goes to war on the scale and frequency as the United States. So we're going to have a lot more Veterans Days from here on out, okay? Now, now that I am too old to deploy anymore, I can admit it. I like war. Okay, everybody, it's a different experience. I've made a whole life out of it. I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma where everybody was a veteran. How many of you have seen any of those memes on social media and it shows these soldiers in these really austere, conditions, and it's going, it's all going to be worth it when you get that free meal from Applebee's. Okay? That resonated with me. Okay? Because look, in my hometown, I'm seriously, it's like, the rumor was the entire high school class in 1950 was in Korea. All right? And I grew up thinking that's what you did. You grew up, you graduated high school, you went off, fought a war, then you came back and got a job. Well, and the whole point of it was, for me, it wasn't Applebee's, it was a VFW. My stepdad, man, they had these stag parties at the VFW. They were wild. He would come back drunk, having gotten a fight with his best friend. I'm not talking to that guy anymore. And next week, they're out drinking again. I'm like, that's what I want to do. And the problem was, I was growing up, the Vietnam War was going on. By the time I enlisted in '73, it was coming to an end. I got to Okinawa with 1st Special Forces Group as guys were coming back from Vietnam. So I just missed that one. And now, I had to listen, when I say I had to listen to all the war stories, I always joke about it. Anybody who had enlisted one day ahead of me and was a Vietnam vet and never let me forget it, all right? And I learned a lot. I trained under some really great soldiers. And these guys, SF, they're just adrenaline junkies. I tried to make a study of what makes a Green Beret, and they're like, whatever they do it to the extreme. These guys had multiple tours in Vietnam, and that pretty much shaped my view of war from there on out, okay? So I went to the military academy after that and got my commission, went to Germany, did the Cold War thing with mech infantry, and then I got to go back to SF. And as I got to 7th Group, well, we were in the middle of, not the middle, we're at the beginning. I went down and trained three El Salvadoran battalions in Honduras in the second year of their war. And then what's critical is they were losing up until that time, and by the second year, we had turned it around. And so they weren't winning, but they weren't losing. And it'd be about 5 more years before they finally decided they're going to finish this thing, okay? And then I went 7th ID, and oh, by the way, an interesting thing about Honduras is they were in the first phase of an insurrection. All right? If you study anything about insurrection, they were in the first phase, getting ready to shift into the second phase, which is the guerrilla war phase. In fact, while I was there, they had the second infiltration of guerrillas from Nicaragua. And what was interesting for me, because it's like everything I study, everything I write about, 8 books, is on war. And at that time, I was studying insurgency. I'm like looking around. Everything I'm reading, I'm seeing it taking place around me. Well, I was offered an assignment to Fort Ord. I was getting ready to get out, and I was offered an assignment to Fort Ord, where I'd get a command. A great assignment, great soldiers. Couldn't ask for better. I'm still in contact with them. So commanded a company, and then Panama was hanging over our head, so I went up to the G3. I had been a war planner. After I did my team time in SF, I went up to become a planner, one of the great jobs. It's, one of the few times that you actually, someone told me one time, join the Army, put your brain in cold storage and join the Army, okay? Because you're not going to need it, right? Planning is one of the few jobs you're actually paid to think creatively, okay? And so having done that, after I gave up my command, I'm like, I talked my way into the plan shop in 7th ID, and I because of my background in Latin America with SF, I had inherited the Panama plan, and so I worked that thing through till the execution. In fact, I spent so much time in and out of Panama that people thought I lived there, and I ended up marrying a Panamanian. So after that, I got out, get my degree to become a historian, and as luck would have it, I got offered the job as a Transportation Corps historian. And right after I got the job, the war broke out. And our truck drivers were fighting that war. I remember a buddy of mine, he commanded in Charlie 39, called me up. He was chief of ops in Kuwait. He's like, Rich, your truck drivers are fighting this war. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm their historian. So I made 5 trips over there. Every year I'd go over about the same time, and my primary duty was to study convoy operations. But what really intrigued me about the study of war is the human experience. And everybody reacts to war differently. It depends on, one, like for the SF guys, I mean, most of these guys have a very high threshold of fear. There's a lot, and the people who have the lower threshold, they're the ones probably have a harder time dealing with it. It depends on loss, human loss, the loss of friends. There's a lot of factors that will shape your outcome. Some of them come back with, as I say, with a lot of extra baggage, but my brother was one. He's a Desert Storm vet, Marine, career Marine, retired as a company gunny, but the vast majority of vets come back much better people than when they went over there. In fact, I rode, like I said, I made 5 trips. I rode on 17 convoys. And I remember, my first trip, I was talking with Sergeant Kirkbride, okay? And the reason I remember his name, because just about all the Kirkbrides in America descend from the same guy who sailed over on a boat with William Penn. And so somewhere in the past, we're probably distantly related. So Kirkbride we were talking one day, and he was a gunner on the commander's Humvee. And we're talking, he's like, man, this tour, this assignment is just a total waste of my time. And I just love busting people's bubbles. And I said, no, believe it or not, this is the best time in your life, and you don't know it. He's like, what? I said, well, first of all, back home, your values are shaped by your environment. Your friends, you have to wear the right clothes, you have to act a certain way, you have to do this and that, you have to have the right friends. It's all this peer pressure. I said, over here, that doesn't matter. You got 365 days in this country, and any one of them can be your last day on earth. And that gets you to thinking. And they said the first thing it changes, your values. And you find out that the most important thing in life is family and true friends. And when I talk about true friends, and all you have served, you know what I'm talking about. The term they would use there is, he's got my 6. He's got my 6. He's got my back. When I got to Okinawa, the highest compliment any SF guy could pay you, because the teams were built around cohesion. If a guy said, I would be proud to have you on my team anytime, anywhere, that means he's willing to put his life in your hands. You can't find better friendship than that. These are guys who are going to pull you out of a burning vehicle, okay? The other thing is, I said, now, while you're cruising down that road, most of the time, you're alert. You've got that, your situational awareness is at high peak. All right, I remember interviewing a Vietnam vet, and I was asking about what it was like to roll out the gate, in Vietnam. One guy told me, he said, your knuckles turn white and things like that. After a while, you get used to it. But one guy explained it this way, and he said, it's when you come back, when you roll in the gate, it's like all this weight's lifted off you. I'm like, what? Well, after my first convoy across the border, and I rolled in it came back in to the Kuwait border, I felt this weight lifted off of me, and I'm like, oh, that's what he's talking. Because you have this situational awareness. You're just paying attention to everything, and you don't know it. And then when you roll in, and it's safe, all of a sudden you could just relax. I'm like, oh, that's what he was talking about. But I told him, I said, see, the fact that you know that any one of these days could be your last day on earth gets you to thinking. And, you know, soldiers are very superstitious, all right? I got a good story about that one. And I said, you know, you don't usually say when I get back. It's usually if I get back, all right? And you realize how fragile and short life is. And so you begin to think, if I make it back, I can't waste time. And these guys come back with a sense of purpose. I've asked the parents. I said, did you notice a change in your son or your daughter when they came back? And they're going, yeah. They're much more mature, and they know what they're doing. I've talked to college professors. Can you tell a difference between the veteran and everybody else? They said, the veteran is here to get a degree. The other students are here to party. Okay? I mean, you know, there's a change that takes place in us. I talk about superstition. All right, so I would probably want to write a chapter just on that subject, superstition and or everybody has something they wear or ritual they go through before they go out on convoy. I saw this one Humvee, and a guy had a pink flamingo beanie baby tied to the front of it. I'm like, what's that? Okay. He goes, oh, sir, that's our good luck charm. I said, what do you mean? Well, he had ordered some lingerie from Victoria's Secrets for his wife. They sent it to her, and it came with his beanie baby. So she sent it to him. So what do you do with it? So he ties it to the front of the vehicle. They're rolling out there for a couple weeks. Now it's time to take it off. They take it off. They get hit by an ID. Okay, this is soldier logic now. 2 weeks with this beanie baby, I didn't get hit. I take it off, I get hit. You got the logic? That beanie baby is not coming off the front of their truck. Okay? Anyway. So, yeah, I made, like I said 17 convoys, and 2007 was the bad year. That was a surge, and that was the peak in casualties, especially in the convoys. And when I got over there, I remember meeting with General Robinson, and look. The transporters, nobody writes about logisticians, okay? They loved me because I'm one of the few guys that's interested in them. And as I said, they're fighting the war. And we'd taken so many casualties on the convoys that the general came up with a policy that unless it was your job, you were assigned to a unit unless it was your job to ride on the convoys, you couldn't go out. And Robinson said, yeah, he said, but Rich, it's your job. Because he knew what I was doing. At that time, it wasn't just the research for writing history. I've written 4 books on the subject of convoy security. But the fact that I was collecting information to bring it back for our command. And so he understood that, and he said, Rich, it's your job to ride out there. So he got me permission. I rode on 6 convoys. 3 of them were hit by IDs. The first one was the bad one. It's EFP. That will punch through any kind of armor. And what's interesting is, we talk about luck. We were rolling up through Baghdad. We're going to take Sword. If anybody knows about the roads and stuff, Sword's one goes through the suburbs of Baghdad. It's the most heavily ambushed road in Iraq. And so I happened to mention to the convoy commander that I've never been on Sword before. And I write all about it. I haven't seen it. This will be my first time. And it was a night convoy. So he asked me, he said, you want to ride up front? You want to ride in the lead vehicle? And being the historian, I come in there, and every year I come in, how have the tactics, techniques, and procedures changed? Well, the TTPs for this year is the enemy attacks the first vehicle, okay? The scout vehicle. We're usually rolling about 100 to 200 yards out in front looking for IEDs. That's the one they took out, all right? And I knew that. But there's you don't question it, all right? So when he asked me, he said, well, you want right up front? Because at that time we had the ASV, the M1117, which anybody been in Vietnam seen a V100, that's it. It's a V100 on steroids. Has all the problems of the V100 and some extra ones, okay? But the thing is, the front compartment is so tight, they couldn't put any radios in there, so the right seat passenger, all he gets to do is look out the window. So they put me up there. So we're rolling. That night, the enemy changed their tactics. They let us pass by. They hit the vehicle behind us, which was the vehicle I normally ride in, all right? Now, you shake your head. The thing is, you don't dwell on this. You know, if you ask any soldier, look, I've studied war, and I'm sitting there looking at it, and like, okay, if this guy had done this, he wouldn't have got hit. This, try to figure it out, and like, there's nothing you can do. You know, you ask any soldier, if you have to choose between being lucky and good, which one do you pick? Yeah, you always pick lucky. And that night I was lucky, all right? All because I said, hey, look, I've never been on sword. The guy goes, well, you want to ride up front. Okay, and I had 2 more IEDs go off on they went off ahead of me after that. So my next trip going over, I'm sitting there and I'm going like, all right. 6 convoys, half of them had IEDs. They went off behind me, one right behind me, the other one's in front of me. I'm like, my luck. You know, the thing about luck is it runs out. And I was very anxious on my next trip going over, and then it hit me. I'm a student of history. This is a common reaction. You ask anybody going in about it, all those paratroopers I talked to, you know, when they jumped into Normandy, they were told they were going to take 50% casualties. You know, they sat there and said, I want you to look to your left and the right. One of you is not coming, or one of you is going to make it back, the others aren't. And, of course, everybody's going, God, I'm going to miss these guys. All right? Yeah, that's how you look at it. It's like it's always going to be someone else till it's your first battle. And after your first battle, you're going, damn, I could get killed. By your third battle, you're going, I am going to get killed, okay? And you just accept it, that resignation of death, and then you just keep functioning. When I realized that, I'm like, oh, okay, that's just a normal reaction. So I got over there, the surge worked. The surge worked. And I think I rode 3 or 4 times through Baghdad, just pushing my luck. But I fed on the lane of those truck drivers. I mean, I love those guys. Yeah, when I'm walking around a fob, I can almost tell you by the way that person walks whether he goes outside the wire or not. Okay, they had a sense of confidence. Scania was one of my favorite stops. It's a pure combat truck stop, has no other function but to service truck drive. Think of a Lowe's off of 64, surrounded by concrete barriers, and it's your last stop before you go into the Sunni Triangle. That's where and the guys, when they're on the road, they just stayed together. They had a swagger about them. They did everything. They went to the PX, the mess hall, and there's that brotherhood. And so this year I went over there was a whole new set of confidence. And one of my favorite stories is I was going to roll with a convoy out of Wisconsin, okay? Have you ever watched the movie Fargo? Everybody had that accent, okay? So I'm sitting there, and every convoy began with a group prayer, all right? What they do is after the convoy brief, the threat brief, they say, okay, we're going to do the group prayer. Anybody doesn't want to attend, you can step out, and only a few people step out. Everybody gets really religious in combat. And so they said, Specialist Johnson is going to lead us in the prayer. They rotated who did it. That was one of the shortest prayers I heard, and but I don't remember the first part, but I can't forget the last part. And Lord, let us take it to the enemy, but whatever happens, thy will be done. And I'm like, did I hear this guy right? Did he just ask God for contact? And the guys are like all excited. They're going, oh yeah, man, we're going to get hit tonight. Like what? He said, every time Specialist Johnson prays, we got hit. And I'm like, okay, I got to find this Specialist Johnson. So I find him and I'm talking to him. He said, well, I don't know, sir. He said, He said, I only did it a couple times. I was only asked to, but both times we got hit good. And I said, well, okay, there's a problem. That there is a whole Pentecostal church back in Oklahoma that is praying that nothing happens to me in this convoy, okay? So God's getting two conflicting requests right now. But this is my 13th convoy, so who knows, okay? So anyway, it was just a run from Anaconda to VBC Victory Base, which is where the palace and all that is. That was Corps headquarters. It's a short run. So anyway, we made it in there. We get in, nothing happened, okay? So anyway, actually, I had a young sergeant accompanying me on this trip, and I told him, I said, I hope you like riding on convoys, because I do. And he did. He was enjoyable, Sergeant Pareto. And he told me, he said, he looked at one of the guys, he goes, hey, well, nothing happened. And the gunner looks at him and says, this is a turn and burn. We get the return trip. These guys were 1 week from going home. And they wanted to take it to the enemy one more time. That was the lane that these truck drivers had. And I had the privilege of getting to ride with these guys, study them, and write about them, okay? So, I'm probably way over time. So, yeah, I know. So I'm going to have to wrap it up. All right, so what makes a veteran, okay? It's this brotherhood. It's this sisterhood. As I'd mentioned, you know, almost all, the vast majority of veterans who serve because of a family tradition of military service. I've been doing this since I was a lieutenant, okay? I would ask these soldiers, and I did it, you know, I love doing it when I'm teaching soldiers in the transportation school. How many of you, you know, I'm not asking you, but this I'd ask them. I said, how many of you, raise a hand, have a close personal relative who have served? Father, mother, grandfather, aunt, uncle, whatever. And almost a vast majority of the hands go up. They do. Okay? Now I find this, if you're just curious, among the officers, there's a larger percentage, for the enlisted men, maybe 1 or 2 hands. For the officers, a lot more. I think they're all trying to pay off their college loan, okay? All right? But the thing is, if you look throughout history in other cultures like Europe, Japan, the same thing happened. What was created are warrior classes. And that's what we've created here. The soldiers who serve in the military today represent less than 1% of the American population. Less than 30% of American youth even qualify for military service. Those that are serving are the best this nation has to offer, okay? And I think the statistic is that less than 7% of Americans are veterans. And again, it's a product of this family tradition. However, being a democracy, anybody can serve. Anybody can join that brotherhood. So I want to thank all of you who have served for your service. I want to thank all of you spouses who have had to, like my wife, who've had to put up with their husband running off to deploy, and all those who have supported, especially like on this day. So thank you, and happy Veterans Day.
Thank you, Rich. I'm sure that was just the stories. Every time I sit and talk to you, I get those stories, and it's fantastic. We want to talk about another one of our men to be added to the monument out front. It's a 4th story, and it's Lieutenant Ernest Chesser. One of his relatives is here visiting us, and I may not have the story completely right. He's lost on January 3rd of 1945, and he's with the 275th Infantry Company C, 7th Division, and they're put on the northern shoulder of the Bulge to push the Germans back out. So they launched the counteroffensive on January 3rd, and that unit takes a lot of casualties. They're in the area of Philipsburg, France, on a place called Falkenberg Ridge. And when I was researching the additional stuff to what Barbara had sent me, one of the researchers from the University of Southern California had done a thing about the university's losses of World War II, and they lost the second highest number of university students and graduates in the war right behind Harvard. So if you think about, the mindset today with some of the schools and service as opposed to that time period, and he noted 3 to 4 of their men killed in that same action. So there were a lot of casualties in the 275th that particular day. They were cut off by a German tank unit. At this time, we would like to recognize our veterans. We're going to play some music. That's a piece we do every year called Letters From War. And as the music plays, we'd like for all veterans to come up forward. That's everybody. If you're a veteran, come up forward and turn around. Please face everybody else. We'd like to present a flower to you. So we're ready to cue the music.
She walked to the mailbox
We're ready to cue the music.
on that bright summer's day. Found a letter from her son in a war far away. He spoke of the weather and good friends that he'd made. Said, I've been thinking about Dad and the life that he had. That's why I'm here today. And then at the end said, you are what I'm fighting for. It was the first of his letters from war. She started writing, you're good and you're brave. What a father that you'll be someday. Make it home, make it safe. She wrote every night as she prayed. And late in December, a day she'll not forget. Oh, her tears stained the paper with every word that she read. It said, I was up on a hill, I was out there alone when the shots all rang out and bombs were exploding. That's when I saw him. He came back for me. And though he was captured, a man set me free. And that man was your son. He asked me to write to you. I told him I would, oh, I swore. It was the last of the letters from war. And she prayed he was living, kept on believing, and wrote every night just to say, you are good and you're brave. What a father that you'll be someday. Make it home, make it safe. Still she kept writing each day. And then 2 years later, autumn leaves all around. A car pulled in the driveway and she fell to the ground. And out stepped a captain where her boy used to stand. He said, Mom, I'm following orders from all of your letters, and I've come home again. He ran in to hold her, dropped all his bags on the floor, holding all of her letters from war. Bring him home. Bring him home. Bring him home.
Army. Marines. Navy. Air Force. Coast Guard. Well, thank you for your service. It's great having you here. It's good you were represented here. While everyone's being seated, I wanted to also recognize a couple of other veterans that are participating in the program here. Dan Seabolt, our chairman for the Historical Committee, who's been, how many years now? You're chairman?
3 coming up on 4.
Yep, 3 to 4 years, but Dan's an Air Force veteran. And Terry, that sang the national anthem for us, is also Air Force veteran, senior master sergeant, retired. She's back over here, but she always does a fantastic job. And I think I recognize David Ranger-Bell is also an Air Force veteran. A lot of veterans participating in the program, and just how it turned out. Our next story, number 5, is Captain Dennis Nicholas, and his daughter approached me a few years back at after memorial service. And Dennis was from York County, graduated from York High School, and he's buried in Williamsburg, Virginia. He's listed as being from Florida because I think at the time he was lost in action, his residence was Florida. And Dennis was serving on the Special Forces Green Beret team. So if you've seen, Rich, you can correct me, but the movie The Green Beret with John Wayne, that was a MACV team, right?
At the beginning?
Yeah.
It's called the Gabriel team.
Okay.
Yeah, the Gabriel.
And anyway, they were teams that assisted training South Vietnamese troops, ARVN. And so Dennis is on Team 56, and he's killed in action there in Vietnam. Graduates from York High School, and found out later on he was also a Virginia Military Institute graduate. So he's another one we'll be adding to our monument. At this time, we'd like to present our wreaths. We have 3 organizations presenting wreaths. The Comte de Grasse chapter, National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution, which is very appropriate since 2 of the people we have to add are Revolutionary War soldiers. Yes. Let's have everyone stand, please, while the wreaths are being placed. Our second wreath is Chapter 13, Disabled American Veterans. Terry is doing double duty with VFW Post 824 today, or it's his twin brother. And our third wreath is Children of the American Revolution, Morehouse Society. He's going to place his right in the center. This is Brent, I believe. Is that Brendan is placing it for us. And that's a great organization most people don't know anything about, so it's a very, very patriotic group of youth. If everyone would remain standing, we'll play taps. It's my alter ego doing that. Thank you. Everyone can be seated. Our sixth story is Petty Officer Robert McRill. Robert was living in York County when he's lost in action, an ID. Robert is serving as a Navy communications specialist, but he's serving attached to SEAL Team 2. So one of the things I had to do is kind of go through a friend of mine whose son is on the teams and confirm that he was not a SEAL, but he was assigned to the team, and 3 of the men are lost in action. The other 2 were Navy SEALs in 2007. I know they had the memorial service for him at a church off of 134, so he was a resident of York County at the time he was lost. Our 7th story, Major Horace Lindsay, is an interesting story because we got his name actually through one of our committee members, and he's serving. He's lost during the Vietnam War, but he's also not in Vietnam. So I had to go through and get some Air Force friends involved in tracking the story down. All we knew at the time is that he was involved in an air crash of a C-130. Well, what Major Lindsay was doing, he was part of a team that would transport troops from Taiwan for R&R or different circumstances in and out of Vietnam. And at the time that their plane was lost, they were ferrying troops from the international airport on Taiwan to the American base that we had there at the time with the Taiwanese forces. They would ferry them down to that base, and then they would ferry them on to Vietnam. When they were leaving the international base, the C-130 contained 6 crew and 37 troops. And 6 miles out in heavy fog, it crashes into a mountain. So all 43 are lost in action or lost in the accident. And then the question came up, does he qualify? Well, he's part of the Vietnam effort, even though he wasn't in theater when he was lost. And if we don't remember him here, he won't be remembered anywhere. So he will be added to the monument. At this time, we'd like to retire the colors.
We ask everyone please stand for the retirement of the colors. Stand as you're able.
Forward, march.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Our last story of one of the 25 to be added to the monument is the story of Sergeant William Tenney. During the War of 1812, what year was that war? That's a big question. You ask that, don't you, all the time? What year was the war? In June 25th of 1813, we have the Battle of Hampton. British forces have been trying to get into Norfolk, and they get turned back. Norfolk is fairly heavily fortified. There's a battery at Craney Island. They have the Battle of Craney Island, and the British forces are not successful in breaching the south side of Hampton Roads. So out of whatever determination, they decide they're going to invade Hampton. They land, I think, at Salters Creek with about 2,000 troops. There are no American regulars on this side of the peninsula at the time to amount to anything. They get together 450 Virginia militia, and if you think of militia, it was more like a club during that time. They weren't very well drilled to any extent, not especially to match British troops. And the British, the 2,000, of course, overrun the 450 militia, and there's actually 6 York County men killed in the action. It's one of the bloodiest days for York County outside of Sharpsburg or Antietam, Maryland. And we had the other 5 on the monument, and this one we missed because he was in a different militia unit. He was in the 68th. The other 5 were in the 115th militia. So he's lost in action in the Battle of Hampton. We don't even know where the 6 are buried. We assume they were all 6 buried on the field. But if you can think of one community back then being very small in York County losing 6 men in one day, it would have been fairly devastating. At this time, I would like to introduce our minister, Reverend Bagley, again, to do our benediction.
Thank you very much. Let's pray, eternal most holy God, until the time that we can beat our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks. We thank you for those who have served and those who are willing to serve in order that this country may be free. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you, be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace now, henceforth, and forevermore. Amen.